And now, from the Sophos News Network and the team that brought you Break a Hacker's Heart, comes the Extortion Edition with all the latest cyber news that we can say out loud.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Break a Hacker's Heart newsroom, episode 5. Arguably, this will be the best episode ever, just like episode 5 of Star Wars. I'm Ben Bashara, your host, and you're not, and with me is Aaron Bugle.
Good afternoon or good evening in your world, and Ben, you're right, because the Empire Strikes Back still resonates today. I mean, the PowerShell Empire. It's still causing grief to many a security practitioner out in the field.
Straight into the nitty-gritty topics. Why not? As today, we're going to explore how cyber criminals have changed the way they approach their victims.
To recap, in the last episode, we explored the lack of visibility and overall monitoring that's desperately needed within organisations, and how the lack of stock-taking and persistent monitoring of access, including who uses it, and also how critical business data is sometimes insecurely stored, leaves a massive opportunity for criminals to exfiltrate it.
Take notice now, because hopefully this isn't new or representative of your own practices.
We've also previously covered the living off the land techniques that cyber criminals use to pivot around a network. However, they're now upping their game and double dipping on their exploits with not only extortion, but wait for it, double extortion.
What is double extortion, I hear you ask?
I didn't hear anything, buddy.
Let me explain. Once cyber criminals get inside your environment, they will first look to discover and extract any information they can find. This could be folders, files, disk images, plans for world domination, your browser history, or a list of passwords. Whatever it is, this technique is known as data exfiltration and is typically their main goal.
Hang on a sec. I thought ransomware was just the flavour of the month.
Still true, Aaron, still true. But keep up, for the times, they are a-changin'. Ransomware remains a serious threat unless organizations are protected through defensive technologies like Sophos CryptoGuard that can detect, block, and reverse the effects of encryption. But the double whammy is when the crims get their victims to take real notice of the ransom by drawing attention to the exfiltrated data they've purloined.
Purloined, hey? Have you been reading Jane Austen again, buddy?
And threaten to publicly disclose that data. That, my friend, is what we tech gurus call double dipping, or as you referred to it, double extortion.
And while you'd no doubt be embarrassed by some of your browser history being discovered, that would be nothing compared to the trouble you'd be in when thousands of your customer records were leaked. Sacked on the spot, never to be employed in the cybersecurity industry again, relegated to only being a chimney sweep or maybe a politician.
Exactly, Aaron. But we would never stoop so low. Here's a real example. Recently, a major critical infrastructure provider in a former superpower country had their petroleum pipeline forced to shut down due to their IT network being infiltrated and their systems knocked out by ransomware. Not only did the ransomware ask for payment to unlock the files needed to operate, but the cyber criminals also threatened the operator with the release of close to 140 gigabytes of files they exfiltrated.
Is exfiltrated like infiltrated except backwards, or is it a new way of making a fancy espresso?
Exfiltrated is pinched, stolen, swiped, grabbed, in a word, purloined.
I see. When I retire in the distant future, I look forward to using the word in a crossword puzzle or a game of Scrabble. Until then, perhaps we should hear more on this new tactic from our friend who swims laps daily in a pool full of maple syrup. We can only be talking about our very own foreign correspondent Chester Wisniewski. Over to you, mate.
Thanks, Aaron. Most of us assume that our critical infrastructure, things like power utilities, water treatment plants, and oil refineries, are some of the most secure facilities in the world, yet they keep being held to ransom. What's up with that? Truth is, these organizations often run two distinct networks, one for industrial purposes, the OT network, and one for business operations, the IT network. Most of the focus has been on securing the OT network, prioritizing worker safety and customer safety, but not so much attention is paid to the IT network. This is where things can get sticky, like that pool of maple syrup that you mentioned. A ransom attack that shuts down the IT network can result in a nasty surprise. These networks are often far more interdependent than the operators think they are. Without IT, you can't track usage, billing, ordering of supplies, and more. The OT network may in fact be safe, but that doesn't mean it will continue to function. Any security pro can tell you that to properly run a network, you must have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And just like a fine poutine, you can't just put gravy on your fries if you don't have cheese curds. Back to you in the studio, Ben.
As always, deeply insightful and a little bit scary, but hey, this is what has happened. Let's learn from these experiences.
Agreed, but let's hear from Paul Ducklin on this one. He's got some great hands-on experience with operational technology. I'm sure he's got a control system at his house to, I don't know, water the garden. I bet you he's got his firewall screening traffic into his watering system as well. Over to you, Duck.
Thank you, Aaron. The interesting thing is that I live in a flat on the second floor, or the third floor, depending on whether you count in C or you count in Pascal, so I don't have a garden, and therefore I don't have a garden monitoring system connected up to my network. Having said that, not connecting things to your network is a cybersecurity choice in its own right, and sometimes it can be a good one. Because you need to remember, with a lot of today's connected devices, whether we're talking about industrial pipelines, warehouse surveillance cameras, or something as simple as a home baby monitor, modern devices typically require you to prime them, if you like, with a password that lets them connect onto your network automatically when they power up. So crooks could use the device not just to collect something like surveillance footage that might be stored on it insecurely. They could be looking to use that device as a vaulting off point, as a stepping stone to get right into the inner sanctum itself. And the other thing is that a lot of today's devices don't deliver the data that they collect directly to you. Typically they upload it to a cloud service operated by the vendor. Now that can be very convenient because it means you don't need to run a dedicated server for every type of connected device you have on your network. But it does mean that there are difficult questions to answer every time, such as, what sort of holes do I need to punch in my own firewall for this device to work? And how much do I trust the vendor when they're uploading, storing, or letting me download the data later? So whatever you do, don't just ask the vendor, don't rely on marketing material, look for objective, independent security assessments, for example from professional penetration testers, and make sure that you get a good explanation from the vendor about how they deal with issues like bug reports, vulnerability discoveries, and security patches. And with that, back to the studio.
Nicely done, Duck.
Thanks very much for that report, Duck. Ben, what do you think, mate?
Well, you know what bursts my capacitors? Human error. It's the number one cybersecurity threat. 58% of organisations say employees ignore cybersecurity rules. 42% of companies have post-it notes stuck to their monitors to show passwords. 50% of data loss is down to human error. 22% of intellectual property theft, human error. 43% of system disruption, human error. 32% of physical damage, human error. 49% of IT professionals share passwords with their colleagues. Half of all workers share access to employee-issued devices with family and friends. 14% of workers in the UK don't even lock their smartphones. It's almost always human error.
How do you do this every time, Ben? You pop a cap and live to tell the tale. It's time to have a nap before you fry a resistor or drop a disc, mate. So while Ben recovers his mojo, let's jump straight into the deep end with my favourite segment, the deep dive. The Roaring '20s were a big thing in fashion. Old-fashioned cocktails and racketeering, blackmail and extortion. Now, a century later, in the 2020s, many of these are back on trend. The reliable crime of coercing someone to do something against their will by blackmailing them is alive and well in the cybercriminal underworld.
Too true.
As we've touched on with our roving reporters, organisations falling victim to ransomware are in many cases able to recover from the computer attack and restore from backups. But it's the theft of data from long before the release of the ransomware that's caught many a victim off guard.
How's that?
employees are being contacted directly by the cyber criminals. They tell them their employer has been hacked and show them proof in the form of private data remuneration packages, corporate expense accounts, and executive bonuses. That data has been stolen earlier can be actively used against the employees.
As a leverage?
Exactly. To coerce the employees to approach their employer and demand that the ransom is paid, if only so their personal data isn't released. It's an effective strategy for the cyber criminals to up the ante on their blackmail demands and make the ransom payment more likely. Case in point with a very recent ransomware attack. It was on a government-regulated primary industry whereby the computer ransomware was only released as a blunt signal to make the victim aware that they were even under a cyber attack. In this case, the ransomware was an easy fix, reflash systems and restore compromised data from a verified backup. But it was the data that was stolen earlier that contained some secret information that couldn't be released to the public. That was the real treasure. The ransom was paid fairly quickly, not to unlock the encrypted files, but to suppress the secret information from being leaked to the public or sold to the highest bidder.
Fascinating. Thanks, Aaron. To hear more about another real-world example, let's head out into the field to hear what's going on.
Ransomware has been a persistent threat for years now and is currently still evolving. The traditional story of ransomware was one of malicious code, rapidly encrypting files with public key RSA encryption and then deleting those files if the victim did not pay the ransom. But here, we tell the tale of double extortion. In a recent scenario, a company, like most do, was holding intellectual property data, proprietary information, private employee data, and customer data. Modern threat actors identified and targeted valuable data, exfiltrated that in its victim's network rather than simply encrypting it. Unfortunately, this then opens up another path of extortion. If the company refuses to pay up, information can be leaked online or sold to the highest bidder on the dark web, and we suddenly see expensive time and effort put into backups and data recovery plans that simply become worthless. Back to you in the studio.
So that's it. It's really happening. Criminals are given every opportunity to not only make their initial attack successful, but get a free leg up on accessing the data that is all too easy to find and steal in order to use it to blackmail their victims and double dip on their investment.
I'd be looking internally as much as externally for threats. Insider threats are one thing, but there's a lot we can do to reduce the opportunity for these types of crimes. At the very least, secure your data, segregate those systems if you have to, least privileges should apply, and review events that are out of the ordinary. Most importantly, be prepared. A lot of this crime is opportunistic by the attackers. Once they're in, they're like, "Hot damn, there's a pretty pile of shiny gold sitting right here. Let's take the whole damn stash and run from the near hills."
So you think the hackers are Beverly Hillbillies and not Russians?
Who knows? Just don't leave data where anyone can steal it. It's like locking your car at a shopping centre. You're trying to reduce risk. Protecting your data is no different.
So clean up your data. Don't leave it hanging about in easy to reach places. And on that note, I've got to go clean up a mess left behind by one of my messy co-workers after he raided the lunchroom during a break.
Nah man, that was the graphics chick.
Well, that's our time for today. Thanks again everyone, and to our excellent presenters from all around the globe, and we hope you've enjoyed our extortion edition.
If you have any queries about the issues raised today, contact Sophos to find out how they can help.
So, that's all from me in the Sophos newsroom.
And that's it from me, thanks to the team. For more information or to follow up on our stories, head on over to sophos.com. See you next time in the newsroom. Stay secure, everyone.
You really didn't leave chip crumbs all over the kitchen, did you?
Mate, it's the graphics guy, I'm telling you.